Hey everybody, I thought it would be really fun to make kind of a artistic spinner prompt video because I know that I love when I'm sitting down and I'm just kind of stuck and I don't have a particular project. I love the idea of kind of coming up with like a fun theme or like a prompt. So I thought that might be helpful for people. And with my recent little bundle I have launched that involves art yarn, there's going to be a bonus that comes out, and then I guess will eventually end up in my shop somewhere. But I had a super fun time making a 12 card yarn spinner prompt deck. So I had a really good time making these, and it really made me sit down and think up some different kind of fun ideas that could maybe prompt your, get your artistic juices going before you sit down to spin. So I wanted to make a little companion video of kind of some prompts that I've used in the past that hopefully might get you thinking about some inspiration of your own. This yarn I really wanted to spin, and I loved the colors. It was so soft, and I love, as y'all know, a multicolored rustic two-ply. And this yarn in particular, I just wanted it to feel like, I don't know, it reminded me, I wanted something that reminded me of if you went to the Pacific Northwest and you went out on the coast. They're so different from the beaches here in the South, and there would be drift, like the brown driftwood, but it would be rubbed really smooth, and then you could find sea glass or like seashells and little like jewel tones that were all tucked into it, but that it had just kind of like this really nice rustic, like Pacific Northwest, seashore feel to it. So I wanted something, I spun this yarn as like a really soft, smooth two-ply. So it's got the texture, but it also is very smooth. Like there's no little fibers sticking out because I wanted it to be reminiscent of, like I said, those worn, worn smooth driftwood or like sea glass. So that's what this particular yarn reminds me of. So that can be a fun prompt, is pick something that is like a scenic location and then like what that makes you think of, and then pick the colors and the textures from there. And then you can go for either like smooth yet rounded, or like something with, fire stars sticking out the sides that, is maybe like fireworks. We've done that before, but that's a fun inspiration that I like to do. Another fun idea is to combine, kind of challenge yourself to combine textures. So depending on if you are a newer spinner or more advanced spinner, or where you fall on the spinner adventure spectrum, that could be a lot of different things. But I think the example being here, these were from some of my mixed bats. I think my mixed like little Luxe mini bat collection. So you've got a great combination already built in without having to blend it yourself of, longer wools, maybe some alpacas, some silks, lots of different fibers in there. I think another fun combination would be doing wool and alpaca. I personally think wool and alpaca are always fun. But then to spin those together, alpaca has short little fibers, and then depending on the wool, could definitely have longer fibers. So really trying to spin a yarn that really embraces both of those is fun. And then that also gets you into fiber prep, because instead of, I think if I was doing the wool and alpaca, the way I would approach it would be really blending it well together in a bat, so that you don't have like longer sections that are wool, then trying to like add the alpaca in as like an accent. You could do it, but I don't think that would be the way I would do it. I don't think that would be the most effective. So I really enjoy, and that's like I said, where the bats come in. I enjoy those really fun blended texture bats, but still blended together. And you could do that with Rologs too. You could get a blending board and do that with Rologs and make all sorts of your own fibers. And I've even seen people kind of make fiber blends in Rologs, like without any tools, like just kind of laying it out on their leg and then rolling it up with some dowels. So there are many different ways to go approaching that, but that's definitely another fun prompt, would be combining more unusual for you textures together. Okay, this one was really fun. Y'all know I am passionate about my slightly thick and thin rustic single ply yarns, and this was one of our braid of the month yarns that was like monarch butterfly themed. So of course it was fall, and so this yarn was just that could be a fun inspiration, even if you were like dyeing the braid or just looking to shop for a braid. But that's kind of what I do. That's a fun part of my job for every month going forward with our fiber collections is getting to kind of pick the vibe. So this one was Monarch. So I wanted something that looked like a butterfly's wings. So this braid was all marbled together, all these different colors. So instead of trying to do something that was real textured, you know, where like the texture of like the 2-ply or the chain ply or whatever was going to be like the star of the show, I went with a single ply for a smooth single ply, and then really let the marbled colors be what it was that was kind of shining here. And so I left these colors purposely kind of marbled and mixed together so you could get this really pretty, like, that's why I love using the word marbled. It reminds me of, you know, like the old-timey paper from like Williamsburg, where like you would put the dye on top of the water and then pick the paper up through it and you would get like the swirly design. That was what I wanted with this Monarch yarn, and I was really happy with the smooth texture and then the marbled colors on this one. Okay, this one you can tell is just kind of a party in yarn. And this one, the colors reminded me, and I'm pretty sure we were watching one of the later episodes of Stranger Things, not episodes, seasons of Stranger Things when I was making this one. And so I loved the combination of like the neon signs with like the black backdrop. So I don't know, that's something that personally, that style of like kind of new wave, like punk 80s music, kind of like nouveau grunge really does it for me. You've been following me any amount of time, you know, that's definitely, you know, I'm old enough that that's where I lean that way. So this one you could say was kind of fashion inspired, but it also could be music inspired of, you know, it's supposed to be like the club lights, kind of like a, you know, retro dive bar feel. And so there's little bits of Firestar, the little black Firestar that's sticking out in this yarn, as well as I did a more exaggerated thick and thin on the singles and then 2-plied it together. So it had that kind of like rock and roll grunge feel to it. So I really loved this yarn. I thought it was really fun. And so this one was definitely like kind of retro dive bar inspired. So that's another fun prompt you could do, is like, what's your favorite like song or album? You know, you see in my pictures all the time, we have lots of records. You could pick like an album and try to be inspired by that, or just a genre of music. And, you know, and there's so many different ways that could go, and it'd be really fun. Okay. So this one is a yarn in finished process. So I made this yarn. So this would be your prompt, would be making yarn for a specific project. So I had this cool, and I was kind of like newer to lace work, and I suck at lace work, but it was an easy lace work pattern, and it was like this fun little like lacy silk cowl situation. So I knew, and I think I'd been gifted this fiber. It was when I was a newer spinner. So I was gifted this really pretty silk fiber in these jewel tones. And so I made this yarn specifically for this project. So I wanted it to be very, you know, thin and pliable. And, you know, and you can see the yarn's definitely not perfect. Like I said, this was one of my when I was a newer spinner that I made. And, you know, I'm not a perfectionist, so it's definitely not perfect yarn, but I made this yarn for this project. So I have this picture here, for that could be your fun prompt. So it doesn't have to be silk or even this project, but picking a project and then making the yarn to go with the project. So I think that's probably one of my favorites. Like, we're being honest. I like spinning yarn with like a finished project of what it is I'm trying to make in mind. So this is my example of that. Okay, and so then this one is probably Old Faithful. I also really enjoy doing just tonals. You could pick a color or a mood, or like a color from a mood, depending on what time of the year it is. And instead of doing like a full color combination, you could see here, I was just really feeling greens. And so you could either do it and them all mixed together of just kind of like a kettle dye effect, or what I like to do, and I think what I ended up doing, maybe not with this exact yarn, but a similar one, is getting all the same color but different tones, and then color grouping it into section from like lighter to darker. And I think that makes a really that one, instead of being like I'm making a yarn for a project, that's usually just kind of like I'm making a yarn because I want to make this yarn, like yarn as project. And then, of course, you get the fun task of finding the perfect project to go with that yarn. But this is definitely one of those, I guess, chicken before egg scenarios, but really just picking a color and approaching it like a painter of like, I'm really going to study green and, go with it from going with it from there is another really fun yarn spinning challenge or prompt that you can look into.